The Ford Pinto fuel tank scandal, cost-benefit analysis, and fatalities. In the 1970s, the Ford Motor Company faced one of the most infamous corporate scandals in history surrounding the subcompact Pinto. Internal memos revealed that Ford engineers were aware of a critical design flaw. The fuel tank was positioned in the rear, making it susceptible to rupturing and exploding in rear-end collisions at low speeds. A devastating internal cost-benefit analysis, later known as the Pinto Memo, calculated that it would be cheaper to pay out anticipated lawsuit settlements for an estimated 180 burned deaths and serious injuries, $49.5 million, than to implement an $11 per car fix to make the tank safer across 12.5 million vehicles. This cold calculus, prioritizing profit over human life, became public during subsequent litigation and a landmark 1977 Mother Jones investigative article. Ford was ultimately prosecuted for reckless homicide, becoming one of the first American corporations charged with a criminal homicide, and was forced to recall 1.5 million vehicles after dozens of preventable deaths and injuries. The Battle of the Overpass, violence against labor organizers. On May 26, 1937, a pivotal event in labor history unfolded outside Ford's massive Rouge plant in Dearborn, Michigan. As members of the United Automobile Workers, UAW, Union, including Walter Reuther, attempted to distribute organizing leaflets on a public overpass, they were brutally attacked by a contingent of Ford's internal security service, overseen by the company's notorious service department head, Harry Bennett. The union organizers were beaten, kicked, and thrown down concrete stairs in a coordinated act of violence. Newspaper photographers captured the event, and the published images exposed Ford's anti-union tactics to the nation, generating widespread public sympathy for the UAW. The Battle of the Overpass became a symbol of corporate brutality and was a critical turning point that ultimately led to the UAW's successful unionization of the Ford Motor Company in 1941, forcing even Henry Ford to capitulate to collective bargaining. Henry Ford's systemic anti-Semitic propaganda campaign. From 1920 to 1927, Henry Ford weaponized his newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, to publish virulently anti-Semitic propaganda. The paper, with a circulation peaking near 700,000, ran a series titled The International Jew, which promoted the fraudulent protocols of the elders of Zion and conspiracy theories of a global Jewish financial conspiracy. This content was compiled into books and translated globally, finding a keen admirer in Adolf Hitler, who kept Ford's portrait in his office and cited him as an inspiration. The campaign only ceased following a 1927 libel lawsuit from Aaron Shapiro. Facing a damaging trial, Ford issued a public apology, claiming ignorance and shutting down the paper. However, this retraction is widely seen as insincere, cementing his legacy as a primary disseminator of anti-Semitic hate that directly influenced Nazi ideology. Collaboration with the Nazi regime, the Ford-Werke plant. During the 1930s and throughout World War II, Ford Motor Company maintained a direct and controversial presence in Nazi Germany through its subsidiary, Ford-Werke, in Cologne. While Henry Ford's personal anti-Semitism was well known and admired by Hitler, the company's involvement went beyond ideology into active collaboration. Ford-Werke was classified as a German-owned operation by the Nazi regime and was integrated into its war machine, producing trucks and other military equipment for the Wehrmacht. Critically, the plant utilized forced labor, including French prisoners of war and civilian conscripts. Despite the parent company in the U.S. claiming a loss of control, historical evidence, including a U.S. government report, concluded that Ford Motor Company in Dearborn never relinquished its financial interest in Ford-Werke and even received royalties and technical data from the German plant during the war, raising profound ethical and moral questions about profiting from both sides of the conflict. The $1.7 billion sudden acceleration scandal of the 1980s. In the late 1970s and 1980s, Ford was engulfed in a massive safety crisis centered on allegations of sudden acceleration in its automatic transmission vehicles, particularly the Ford Audi 5000. Drivers reported their cars lurching forward unexpectedly, causing hundreds of accidents, injuries, and fatalities. While the exact cause was fiercely debated, with Ford initially blaming driver error, internal documents and investigations revealed a deeper corporate scandal. A 1972 internal memo from a Ford engineer, known as the Pinto Memo 2, had previously warned that a specific transmission design used in millions of cars could be prone to a defect causing sudden shifts from park to reverse. Despite this knowledge, Ford continued using the design for years. The resulting public panic and thousands of lawsuits led to a catastrophic drop in sales for its subsidiary, Ford Motor Company, and culminated in what was at the time the largest single class action settlement in history, $1.7 billion in 1987 to compensate owners and retrofit millions of vehicles, a devastating financial and reputational blow. Exploiting company doctors to suppress the River Rouge blood ban. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, Ford's sociological department and its notorious service department under Harry Bennett implemented a pervasive system of control over workers' lives. A dark and often overlooked aspect of this was the use of company doctors to enforce production goals at a severe human cost. At the colossal River Rouge plant, industrial accidents involving toxic chemicals, molten metal, and heavy machinery were common. To maintain uninterrupted production, Ford management pressured its in-house medical staff to provide quick, often inadequate, treatments. Most notoriously, a policy known as the River Rouge blood ban was enacted. To avoid wasting time with blood typing and compatibility checks during emergencies, company doctors were instructed not to give blood transfusions to injured workers, regardless of the severity of their blood loss. This policy, prioritizing assembly line speed over human life, undoubtedly led to preventable deaths and epitomized the brutal industrial logic of Ford's empire. The Firestone tire catastrophe, a deadly corporate partnership. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Ford was at the center of one of the deadliest automotive product recalls in history, stemming from its long-standing partnership with Firestone. The crisis primarily involved the Ford Explorer, the nation's top-selling SUV, equipped with specific models of Firestone ATX and Wilderness at tires. Investigations revealed a deadly combination. The tires were prone to tread separation, especially when underinflated, and the Explorer's high center of gravity made it susceptible to rolling over when a failure occurred. The resulting crashes led to over 250 deaths and 3,000 serious injuries in the U.S. alone. A massive public blame war erupted between the two corporate giants, with Ford accusing Firestone of faulty tires and Firestone blaming Ford's vehicle design and recommended tire pressure settings. The scandal culminated in the recall of 14.4 million Firestone tires and a permanent severance of the nearly 100-year business relationship between Ford and Firestone, exposing a catastrophic failure in corporate responsibility and product safety oversight. The deadly speed-up and authoritarian control of the $5 day. While Henry Ford's 1914 announcement of a $5 workday was revolutionary, its dark underside was a system of intense worker surveillance and control designed to maximize productivity. To qualify for the high wage, workers had to submit to the investigations of Ford's sociological department, which probed their home lives, spending habits, and morality. More critically, on the factory floor, the promise came with a brutal speed-up of the assembly line. Managers relentlessly increased the pace of production to extract maximum efficiency, leading to widespread physical and mental exhaustion. This dehumanizing system, which treated workers as mere cogs, resulted in a dramatic spike in employee turnover. In 1913, before the $5 day, Ford's turnover rate was a staggering 370%. The high wage was, in fact, the only way to attract and retain workers for such grueling, repetitive, and authoritarian labor, revealing it as a calculated business decision to stabilize his workforce, not an act of pure philanthropy. Environmental negligence, the Mahwah plant and the Ramapough Lunaape nation. For decades, Ford's former automobile assembly plant in Mahwah, New Jersey, was the largest in the world. Its operations, however, created an environmental and public health disaster with a lasting racial injustice component. From 1967 to 1980, the plant disposed of its toxic industrial waste, including paint sludge and solvents, by dumping it on the traditional lands of the Ramapough Lunaape Nation, a marginalized Native American community. The waste, laden with lead, arsenic, and other carcinogens, contaminated soil and waterways. This led to severe health consequences for the Ramapough, including high rates of cancer, autoimmune diseases, and miscarriages. The community fought for decades for recognition and remediation. In 2006, the EPA declared a portion of the area a federal Superfund site, and in 2019, Ford and its waste hauler settled a major lawsuit for a reported $130 million, a stark admission of the long-term ecological and human damage caused by its industrial practices. The widespread use of asbestos and resulting mass tort litigation. For much of the 20th century, Ford, like other automakers, extensively used asbestos in its vehicles, particularly in brake linings, clutch facings, and gaskets, for its heat-resistant properties. This decision, made with knowledge of the health risks, later spawned one of the largest and most protracted waves of mass tort litigation in corporate history. Mechanics, auto workers, and even amateur home mechanics who sanded asbestos-containing brakes were exposed to lethal airborne fibers, leading to diagnoses of mesothelioma, asbestosis, and lung cancer decades later. Ford has faced tens of thousands of lawsuits from victims. Internal company documents revealed that Ford was aware of the dangers of asbestos as early as the 1930s, yet continued its use for decades without adequate warning. The company has paid out billions of dollars in settlements and verdicts, establishing a massive asbestos liability trust fund to handle future claims, a lasting and costly legacy of its prioritization of industrial utility over worker and consumer safety.